How you doing today?
Great. How are you, Ryan?
Doing good. I'm excited to have you on the show because you're a good friend, and we'll be able to talk about a lot of the stuff that you and I have been chatting about for years. And for the listeners, as right before you dive into your background and who you are, but I'll have to give a little bit of a shout out that as you and I were sitting over beers and talking about what we should be doing with our lives a few years ago, you had really challenged me to get into this whole value building, exit planning journey that I learned a lot from selling our business, but really pushed me towards actually making a business out of it, and which resulted in the podcast. But so before we could dive into the full story, why don't you just give the listeners a little bit of a background of where you came from and then how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I've been a software consultant for 25 years, and so I've worked at a lot of large corporations and small businesses, mid-sized businesses. The great thing about it was you got to see a lot of different industries. You got to see what worked, what didn't work, who's ahead, who's behind, all those kind of things. So it was a great learning experience for understanding not just technology, but business problems and how people were approaching them. So I ultimately, I have an economics degree. So I come at it from a business perspective, even though it was implementing technology, which is really fun. So with that, that really led me down this path of the last 10 years or so, seeing a lot of mobile development happening. And it's really interesting how it was really different than previously how development happened in a lot of these companies. There were lots of challenges around who was leading it. A lot of times marketing or sales were leading it, not technology or IT, which was really interesting. Things moved really fast, but didn't always get to a good place very, very quickly. So we just learned a lot about that process, which led me to develop Mobile Composer about 5 years ago. And so we actually focused on building a platform to make implementing technology easier. So we have a platform that has there's three main areas. So one is the technology piece of this, which is all the tools and libraries to actually improve development. So both web development and mobile development. So you can kind of plug things together and build a new product quite easily. There's lots of still custom pieces that have to get developed. But one of the things I like to talk about is like security. Security is one of those things from a developer's perspective. It gets done on every single project. And it's just ridiculous because you do it exactly the same way, or you should do it the exact same way every time. So if we built those things into a package that we use, and then there's really two choices. Do you want to use Active Directory? Do you want to use database security? So we can implement either of those options, but that's really your choice, right? You shouldn't spend 50% of every project rebuilding the same stuff. So that's the technical heart of our platform. We also then have all the pieces to manage a product lifecycle in there. So everything from how you generate ideas and validate ideas to how do you develop a go-to-market strategy, how you actually do your design, your user experience, and then all the development, project management, and maintenance long-term to support that. And then this includes all the best practices so that you can actually make sure that you're continuing to, we're applying something from one industry to another, so make sure that this is the way you develop these ideas.
Well, what I think is super interesting, and because you've pivoted a couple of times, is you've gotten to the point where you realize that what you had developed there, and so for the layman's people who are maybe not familiar with some of the technical stuff, it's like the WordPress came out to make developing websites easier, because every time you build a website, there's a lot of the core functionality, and a lot of industries have done this over their growth of their industry as they've systematized and standardized certain parts of the deliverables, because again, like you said, you don't have to recreate the wheel. And so, and as you've made this shift and you've started to realize how technology has become easier, because the whole point of having you on the show and understanding of what the value that you're bringing for these businesses and the values of these businesses, it start to maybe give the listeners a 2 cents on what are the conversations happening and what's the dialogue going on about how you guys fit into your customer.
Well, so that actually leads into why we pivoted. So we built the platform initially, and then we built a product on top of it. And what we've learned over the years is we're really good at figuring out how to develop products, how to find the right market, how to identify what the product should look like, and how to actually bring that to market. So we've kind of pivoted and pivoted back, actually. but with a lot more understanding of what the platform needs to do. So the conversations now really revolve around, well, first of all, who we're talking to. So we tend to talk to small to mid-sized company business owners who are really stuck in a situation that they have a business that they've built, over years, and it's potentially a really good business, but the valuation is not where they want it to be or where they think it is. And I just think that, this actually leads into you and I both read Built to Sell about the same time when you were kind of figuring out some of these things out and we were figuring some of these things out. And I just think it's really the 8 key drivers in there really identified a need in the market to actually approach what you're bringing to market. So it's one thing to create a valuable business or a business. As an example, I have a friend that he has a manufacturing company. It's worth about $5 million or it has about $5 million in revenue, does about 10% profit, so $500,000 in profit. What's the value of that company? Well, it turns out it's not very high. I think from your estimations, I think the valuation would be about 1 to 2 times the EBITDA. So 500 to a million roughly that business is worth. Well, he can't sell the business and maintain his lifestyle based on a company that's actually producing $500,000 a year. So when we talk about these things, it's really about how do you actually find a market that you can develop recurring revenue for an existing company. And so that's what we come in and look for. And so our method of doing that is to look at SaaS solutions, so software as a service, that you can have a subscription service that you're providing to potentially the same customers that they're already working with, because you already have trust, you already have a relationship, you already understand some of the needs they have and understand the gaps in those markets. So we can actually help develop a niche SaaS solution that actually targets these their customers and help them build out that solution.
If you're a normal business owner and you're looking at this, what does it mean to them, to their business? Do you have some stories or some examples of how people have implemented this?
Sure. So let me tell you about a sales training company that we work with. And so this would be in the service realm, right? So they're a service company, they're non-technical, and they go out and provide sales training to organizations, and they're really good at it. But their challenge is, what is the value of that company? Well, it's not great, because without each of those individual people, the company's worth nothing, right? So it's a small team. Without that team, the company's worth nothing. So
right, because they consult and they just go out and just it's project based, right? So they're going out, they're getting a client, they're doing some sales implementation and training, and then they have to hopefully get the repeat business, right?
Exactly. So it's completely project-based. So their need is really to generate recurring revenue and to pull them out of the process, right? So what we did for them is basically went through and as you think about part of the process, what we did is they identified that they wanted to build recurring revenue and figure out how to actually get provide something that would build the recurring revenue. Well, we actually sat down and started talking through this, and what we really have to come from is from the perspective of the end user that's going to be using this, so the salesperson that they're training. And we then designed a solution around this and then built the product. So there's a mobile app that they can actually provide. So there's an additional fee. Now they go in and sell a project, but they also sell the ongoing, the app and all the tools and content that come with that. Now they can be more focused instead of going out and doing a project, just maintaining and building additional information that's going to go into the app, and then the tool, continuing to build the tool and the functionality of the tool for what that provides for those salespeople. But now they're locked in. They have, it would be very hard next year. They want to go with a different sales trainer. That's not really a doable solution, because this is now part of their day-to-day process for all their salespeople. So they're locked in, plus they're building a recurring revenue stream based on this. So the process for this, is we come alongside them and work with them to actually build this. They have the industry expertise and the business knowledge. We come along with that and provide our technical knowledge and business knowledge of how to implement something like this. So they have no technical people in their company, so we provide all the technology piece of this. But now they're providing a software product to their customers that is providing this recurring revenue. And
their value of their business goes way up, and they remove themselves from the process, and everybody's a lot happier.
Exactly. But it's that whole process can be a little scary maybe if people haven't gone through it. But They do not have the technical resources, but they can come along and actually build something recurring, build something of high value that actually gets them where they want to be with the business, using someone like us to actually, provide the technical know-how to do that.
So then you've got another example that you can kind of shed some light on, and how maybe a different industry has implemented something that, they, had expanded their services or been able to become more technology enabled?
So this is a little bit different scenario. It's not so much about building recurring revenue, but how software product can actually change the growth of your business. So we just completed this product that actually went live here a couple weeks ago, and it's a medical company that builds custom formulated nutrient products based on specific cases. So what happens is a patient goes to a clinic and they do all their tests, and then that data goes to a lab. The lab and the clinic have all the HIPAA processes to actually pass that data back and forth, but there's no great process for passing that data then to this company to actually formulate the right product.
Yep.
So what we did was build a mobile app that actually allows them to just scan a QR code that came from the lab. It has all the data they need, but it has none of the HIPAA data. So the cool thing about this, it gives this company, basically they're now connected with all the labs in the country that do this, and they're the preferred vendor for this product because they've made it so easy to work with them. So their growth model is to now provide this through all the labs in the country because they have the solution to make that work.
How is what they used to experience with the custom coding and development different to what is available today, and how does that actually change their business?
Well, I think it's interesting. A change that's happened in technology is we've gotten faster and faster and faster, and so we use some new, there's new agile, different terms and different processes that have increased the speed. There's better technology, better ways to develop things. That's great, but in some cases it's actually a bad thing because there needs to be the strategy piece that works with this, and all of the processes. Like I'm a really big believer in the lean methodology, like lean startup methodology for creating ideas and creating products, because you actually need feedback in these mechanisms. So this is what we saw in just doing mobile development, 5-10 years ago. Marketing was leading these efforts, and they did not have the technical chops to actually manage a project this way. So this is exactly why a lot of companies are scared to do something like this as well, because they don't necessarily have the experience doing this, right? So the challenge is, and I see this way too often, is that they work on a product, and it might be a really good idea, but it's usually not the idea you started with. It's almost never the idea you started with. So you need to be able to change and manage that. So people have a budget that says, I'm going to spend, $300,000 building this app, and then when it's done, we're going to sell it and we're going to make money. Well, the problem is they're off just a little bit, and they can't sell that app to anybody. So now they don't have any budget left, though, to make the changes that could actually make it a really good product. We see that all the time. So I think that's
sorry to interrupt, but let's go back to maybe we can resonate with some of the listeners here, where it was a manufacturing company that went online, and they wanted to have an ordering POS system that's integrated online, and they spend $500,000 on it, and then no one liked it. Or there was some sort of other, delivery system, so there's all these different functions that I've watched people spend tons of money on and didn't have any exposure. It took years and tons of headaches, and the developers and the technical people never knew what they were trying to get across, and then it totally flops the first time. And so how does that relate to what you
well, so I guess back to the point, like, how do you actually solve that problem? I think there's two things. So one is there's the methodology. So you have to use, I'm a big fan of the lean methodology, because you actually need to do incremental development and then prove that out. So the validation part of that is really, really important. So how do you get feedback from actual people that are potentially going to pay you money, and can you get them to commit to you before you even have something developed, by showing them so much value in what you're creating? And then they can contribute some to actually providing. You go talk to them, you say, we want to do this, and it's going to help you with this problem. It's like, yeah, but that's not quite my problem. Here's my problem. And they'll help you identify it and help you make it better.
Expand on that story, would you? Expand on that
What's
story, because I think you've got a ton of experience on this, and I've gone through some of this in my own experience, the right and the wrong way. But maybe elaborate and tell. All right.
Well, can I use you as the example?
Sure.
So, I mean, I think it's the same process, and it's not to say that people aren't good or taking the right effort, right? It's just a process that has to be followed through. So, we're working on the app for your business, right? To manage accounts and manage the growth plans and actually manage day-to-day business activities to actually grow and build and exit a business, right? So that was a little bit of an unknown. Like sometimes you're dealing with something that really is not out there. And so how do you do this in a way that actually gets us to the solution? Well, we now know decisions we made a year ago are not valid anymore. And we've had to modify and continue to improve and change what we're developing because of the feedback we get. And that's how it should go. That should be the process. So this is why people talk about building a minimum viable product. And sometimes you need more than like a minimum viable product can be a pretty big thing sometimes when you're talking business to business kind of tools. But it still is important to get to where you're solving this one problem. And now you might come back and change it. You almost certainly will come back and change that. And you need to plan a budget for that the product is not a static thing that you build once and you're done, you walk away from. So back to the point of using the right methodology. The second piece is having the right team that's going to not only develop it but maintain it. So this is where we come in, that we actually do truly partner with people. So, and that can mean a lot of things which we can talk about in a little bit, but we actually come alongside and know that we're going to be responsible for maintaining this as we develop it. So we actually want to design, and maintaining can be evolving as well, right? So how do you evolve this product as we go forward? So we actually design things in a way that we want to be able to maintain it and get paid for that, because we're making smart decisions and making sure that we can continue to evolve and improve that product.
Well, and I think, if I can go back to the methodology, and then I'll jump in on the team, because so the methodology and what you were explaining, I think everybody can do this in their business, which, that's how the copier business got into the managed IT, got into the software, and I think, we were almost doing it. A lot of industries, the consultants tell the industry what they should be doing instead of asking the customer. And I think, right, so many people where all the consultants make a ton of money in the industry because they say, you need to do this. And then you go back and you realize that your customer doesn't even want it. But like in this fashion, I think you've got plenty of other examples, but everybody's able to actually do this, where they go ask their customers, and whether they're in professional services, whether it's accounting, legal, whatever it is, that they've got the ability to ask their customers, like, how could your experience be better? And what are the different ways that it could be better? And their customers have really good ideas. So there's opportunities to be mined out of that. And I've seen people, and that some of the listeners might see it on the digital marketing that's out there, where like these people get crazy followers, and then they'll ask their customers in their list, like, hey, would you buy this if I develop this? And people go, yeah, do it. So that's a lot, because you're getting some seed funding or some buy-in, knowing that your idea is at least in the right direction. It's kind of like the whole cannonball and bullets theory from Jim Collins' Good to Great.
Yeah. But so I think you made a good point that no consultant can tell you what the right features are, the right functionality, or the right thing. Your customers can tell you. And the great thing about, like, we do some work with startups, but mostly we're working with existing companies that have products or services that they're offering. So they already have customers. And we really want to be working on making sure we're meeting those same customers' needs. So it's really about growing within those customers. And that's not always the case, but a lot of times. So the goal is go talk to your customers and get feedback. It's a really fun process. One thing that I hear out of that, people are afraid of sharing their ideas because they think someone's going to take them. I think that's completely the wrong approach. Now, there's people I wouldn't share certain ideas with, but for the most part, the best thing to do is to go share your ideas with as many people as possible, and they're going to provide feedback. And that feedback, you need to be cautious about it, because people can derail what you're trying to do as well by taking you down the wrong path. But you need to take the collective of that feedback and then work towards a solution that can actually solve those issues that came up as you talk to customers. So then it's a really fun process, and it gets you to a really valuable place very quickly.
Well, yeah, because I mean, like, you're actually, you have immediate feedback on whether you're right or the wrong direction, and you're getting feedback from the people that are going to pay you. And so let's go back to then my kind of insight on the right team. And I think you've got some really good examples you can share where, so what I've experienced in projects in my past, whether we were the actual software company coming in because we were the software vendor at that point, or we were in turn at being a part of the purchaser and being the client buying it, where you have the idea and then you've got the technical people, and then you've got scope creep, and you've got people like that whole process. I think everybody can relate, even if it's just an accounting system. Like, it so never works out the right way. So there's so much horrible experiences and fear. And how does the right team, and how do you combine the technical and the development of that to the strategy and to the vision?
I think that in my mind, what I've always taken the approach is people like development is a hard something that people can conceptualize, that there's time that needs to go into development, and so they allocate a whole bunch of the project to that, and they want to get going on that as soon as possible. I think instead the approach should be, don't push development as far off as you possibly can, and instead focus on these conversations, the research, the getting feedback, the design, getting feedback on design, because essentially you can get to a point where you have a product on paper that's fully designed, fully ready to implement, that is not developed, but you can actually go sell that way. I know a lot of people who have started companies that had no product to sell, and they went out and sold it and said, here, will you buy this? And they'll sign up customers, and then they can go build the product. So if you have that, development flows pretty easily, because so you don't get off base, because everything's been defined pretty much up front in the process of designing the product. If you don't do that, that's where you get into all sorts of issues, because developers go off and develop something that wasn't what was designed, because there was nothing designed. So it's you tell a developer, hey, I need a page to do this, and they go off and create it. And it's like, well, that doesn't meet our brand, that doesn't meet our functionality, that doesn't meet anything. So you now wasted a whole bunch of time on that. And that's really, really common, right? And it gets way more complex when you're integrating with other systems. So if you're building something that's going to integrate with an ERP system, you're going to integrate with some other system, it just complicates that so much more. So the more you have identified and bought in at all levels, from internal to external to customers and stuff, the easier that process will go. At the same time, you have to balance that with, you're going to always be learning. So there are times to say, this is what we planned. We need to make a change to that and modify how we're going to deliver that. But that needs to be a conscious thing. Too often that's just because something didn't get designed that happens, versus a conscious effort to say, we're actually making a decision to change how we're approaching this because of what we've learned.
So what because I was giving you I was interjecting a little bit. So you had the two things that were really important. Was there a third, or did I distract you too much?
Oh, I think it was just the two.
So then let's go into maybe some examples. What are some exact examples of something where there was a analog business or a traditional business, whether it was a manufacturer, or I know you've got some transportation things in the works and some other, these business owners that they're saying, okay, what is an exact example of a problem that they would be able to solve that it could be an opportunity within their own client base?
Yeah. So another example would be a sewer and drain company that we work with. So basically, their solution, they're large, they're in multiple cities, and they actually have products that they use a lot of different technology products to run their business. The problem is none of them are specific to their industry, and this is where we talk about niche SaaS solutions. There's lots of good technology products out there, but they might not be good for you, right? So the challenge is, in this industry, can we provide a better solution that, number one, provides a lot better service and a lot better at communicating that service to their customers, which is always a struggle in that industry, as well as actually getting better data collected so they understand how long is this call going to take, what does this situation look like. So there's very specific pieces that happen in this industry that aren't tracked well in a standard product. So with them, they're building a solution that actually allows them to run their business better, and that provides a lot of value in and of itself. But they're actually looking at this as, once they get this done, they want to take this to market because it's going to be the industry solution for their industry, and they know it inside and out. And they're also recognized that they know it inside and out. They can provide that to other smaller organizations in their industry, and so they're competing kind of on their traditional business, but they're providing their leadership and their technology then to other companies through this product.
So you're saying some guy in a bunch of rubber boots that comes down with this big snake to do my to do my sewer draining and has the carbon copy paper, it can actually have some information and make my experience as a customer a little bit better, and they make their company more valuable, and then they can go sell that product and service to other industry service providers.
Right. So things that we're including, like, what is the frustration with working with someone like that? Well, when are they going to show up, right? So what if you actually, we have a customer-based app and the delivery person's app, the service person, so they have their own app. But what if you got updates on your app that are telling you, hey, they're going to be here in 10 minutes? And that was a real number that, it's not like, hey, give us a 4-hour window and we'll be there sometime, right?
Right.
So you can actually see when they're coming. It's like, okay, I need to be here in 10 minutes.
Well, how about even for like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's like, how about even for the guy that, like, because my first house that I had to do this a lot actually. And he'd come in, he'd tranche through the house, he'd come and he has no idea that it's downstairs and it's a super small stairwell and that he could potentially go out through the back. So, I mean, like, the whole thing was literally a cluster from start to finish and you hate every minute of it.
Yeah, exactly. So now, though, once you're a customer, now they keep that data. So the next person that comes, even if it's not the same person, he can look at that history and say, "Oh, here, I need to go in the back, and here's where these pipes are. Here's where this is that I need to go. Where I need to go do this job." So all that can be collected and saved and reused, and it's all provided to him right through the app. So it's in real time because it's not paper documents that were printed out that morning or the night before or something. Here it is. It's updated live in the app. And it gives me everything I need to know, as well as it gives me everything I need to know training-wise, like certain things you run into situations. And this is something we build into a lot of our apps. The training aspect, real-time, just-in-time training is a really important aspect of a lot of these tools because now I'm out there doing something and I get stuck on something. So what are those things you get stuck on? Let's record a little, 30-second video and explain how you need to do this in this situation. And that person can then go through that process while they're on site and have a very effective delivery or service call that actually makes them look really good, and they were able to complete it in one shot, right?
Yeah, the service technician enjoys himself because he looks good. He's not bumbling through a bunch of stuff, and everybody, everybody gets a better experience.
And one more thing to mention there, another thing that I think is very useful is the business model canvas. So this is a process we use as we're trying to identify business models. So I always start with the audience because I like to figure out who are you actually touching in what ways, because you end up finding things that you will not, it's not always obvious until you bring this up with people and say, okay, you're going to provide this, or these people need to integrate with this system. One, you want to make it really easy for them to do that. But two, what are the values that they're getting out of the system that actually add something to them so they want to keep coming back and using it, whether they're paying for it or just they need it as part of some of their service that's free or whatever it is, they have to want to use it. And so if you make everybody along the way want to use it for the right reasons for what they're doing, now you can also start to identify other financial markets of what are they willing to spend to do this and why would they spend that money. And you can find additional opportunities, like in this case, where we needed to find someone else to actually pay for it. And I think we have a solution for it. And we have a long ways to go on that one. But it's interesting when you see it. So we use Business Model Canvas next, which is, I don't know if you've seen this, Ryan, but it's basically a one-page document that lays out, I believe there's 9 different factors. So it's everything from your client relationships, your cost centers, your revenue centers. And there's a good book out on this as well, but you can find a lot of information on the internet. But it's basically a way of kind of laying out your model for this product and really in one page fully capturing it. And the concept is, along with lean startup methods, you fill out this one page and go share this with people and go walk through it. And you're always editing it. And you're refining until you actually get to your business model that can make this work.
Well, and I love it. And maybe I'll give you a couple real concrete examples from people that have been on this show. So Josh Elzechi, he was a digital marketer, which is a service-based business. So Josh gave a specific example on it's not as sellable because the business is not worth as much because it's people-oriented. It's not as scalable. There's a lot of these risks. So he went out and then through some of the research and stuff like you were talking about, he said, okay, well, I needed to develop a marketing audit based system, and then he integrated into the client. So he ended up creating this software because he then is allowed to scale and create more value to their customers, but he created more value to his business, and then he was able to piece that off and then sell it to other agencies. And I think there was another example that you and I have been looking out there, and it was the name escapes me, but there was a company that they were in the garage door business or the HVAC business. They created their own, they had problems with dispatching and their customers and the communication, all this. And then they created a dispatch marketing or a dispatch software to help with their technicians and the user experience with having to engage with their service technicians. And then they were able to go into the garage door, the plumbing, and I think the HVAC. And then they ended up taking that and then selling it to other service providers. So it was a way that, like you said, it started small, but they were able to continue to refine it along the way.
Right. Plus, if you can identify up front one customer, that one audience that's really, really going to be, is going to love this product, it adds value to them, you can now start to build on that and expand out to other audiences and other ways of using it. But you really have to narrow down one to start with. If you try to approach more than that, you're going to end up with a product that doesn't make anybody happy.
So let's expand on that and when it relates to the business value and how does that impact, so when we look at the investment cost and whether there's risk and whether that succeeds or not. And like how, when you're talking about the business or the built to sell methodology, what is it doing to the businesses and how are they able to, protect their business and increase the return that they get based on what they're doing through this process?
Well, I think a couple things. One is recurring revenue can completely change your valuation, right? So back to the example I gave earlier, $5 million manufacturing company, 10% profit is worth between $500,000 and $1 million. Well, our goal with them is we're looking at creating a product that if we can get over the next 3 years to $1 million in sales for the SaaS product, the way of valuing SaaS-based revenue is right now it's running about 5 to 6 times revenue generally. So if we can add $1 million of SaaS revenue to this, they go from $5 million to $6 million in sales, but they go from a valuation of between $500,000 and $1 million to say $5 to $7 million in value.
So I know it's wild when we actually talk about it because so for the listeners that might have a traditional business versus a lot of the SaaS and the software businesses that are out there, I've had multiple people on the show, and it can quickly get overlooked if we don't expand on it. Is that so when you're valuing a company on 3 to 5 times EBITDA or the profit, so that could be, again, like on $500,000. I mean, you're looking at, $2 million. But what happens is that's on profit, right? So that's based on profit, even though they might be a $5 million revenue business. Totally off the different end of the spectrum is software companies that are valued on revenue. Not profit, which is so crazy. And I was given this example, Loren, in front of a group the other day where, so Amazon is technically an online retailer, right? So they trade on a multiple of revenue versus all the other traditional retailers that trade on a multiple of profit, which doesn't make it, they're playing different games at that point. So They're getting value in completely different ways.
But this is why every company needs to be a software company going forward. So the one other interesting thing here, and you've brought this up a few times previously when we've talked, is in built to sell, the whole hub and spoke method of management, where everything runs through, business owner created this and they're running everything and everything runs through them. Well, when it comes time to sell, the value of that business degrades a lot because it's not sustainable necessarily without them there. So the value of building a separate software solution, usually that will help in reduce it. That ends up being pushed to a different group or different people managing it. And so you've now spread out some of that responsibility, which a buyer is generally looking for in how they value your company.
Well, I think there's a really interesting example that if anybody's in the managed IT services space, so there was a managed IT company years and years ago that was sick of the break fix. And so they started developing software to help do all the stuff preventatively. Well, they started also working on the standard operating procedures and all that stuff. So they started putting their stuff into a system. They called it ConnectWise, and they essentially, their managed IT part of the business became the least valuable, and they kept it as like a beta. But then they ended up taking that software, which has grown like crazy, and selling it to every other managed IT provider. So it's and I don't know what is out there, Loren, because I know that you and I have read the books like Bold and Abundance and Exponential Organizations and all these books that have, talking about this, that, you have to have technology enabled services these days. So like, how you're layering in technology into your operations, I think is just something scary, especially when someone's looking at, a 3 to 7 year runway before they want to get out. How do you measure the increase in value and the investment cost or the cash flow expense over the course? I mean, because I know you get some interesting ways in how you're lining all that up to be able to show the value there.
Yeah. So we're taking a little different approach because we want to be fully invested in what we're building, and we want to maintain that long term. So we're actually working with organizations to actually take an equity stake in return for some of our efforts, so that we're fully committed into long term into developing this. All the way to the point where what's really been fun for me the last 6 months has been, we've been getting involved in a lot of early cases before we're even investing in this or starting development for something. We're out talking to investors. Not that we're looking for investors for these problems, but we want them to buy this in 3 to 5 years. And so we're actually letting them help. They're giving us guidance on how they want to structure things so that we can actually potentially, and there's no commitment right now, but we can potentially have a buyer lined up 3 to 5 years out that, as if we hit these targets, here's the expectation of how we're going to do this, here's what the value is going to be, and here's the exit plan. So not only is it helping define like the value of building the software piece of it, but it's really helping define the value and a plan to actually get to an exit for an owner overall.
Well, and it's like when you think about the investment that because the recurring revenue and all the stuff that's in the build, so all the different 8 key drivers are all intertwined, and it's about building a sustainable machine that runs without you, that is easily transferable, and the best way to do that is through technology. And I think there's just so much fear around, how are we, taking our business in the traditional sense and systematizing and not just creating, Word docs with, to-dos and bullet points. So, but actually taking the processes and automating them. And then, how much does that cost? So hypothetically, let's go back to that manufacturer. So let's say, they got 500 in EBITDA and they invest, call it $100,000 a year or something for the next 3 years, or, and they've got, some other partnership on this. That return should be significant, because let's say they got $500,000 and they should get another, $3 million to $4 or $5 million out of it when they eventually exit. So there's a direct return based on what they're putting into the business.
Yeah, and it's a big multiple of the return. Yep.
So what are the, when you think about like what the business owners these days, because I think it's a big black box and it's very mysterious on technology and apps and development, because it's so foreign based on the customer service relationships and service delivery that a lot of companies have. How are what you're describing, how is that different than an ERP system, than marketing budgets, than CRM budgets, than all that other stuff? So you kind of, spread that into, okay, so you've got all this other technology spend that happens no matter what. And how does that differ for what you're explaining?
Well, I think any of those are tools to run your business. What we're talking about is value creation through building new products and ideas that you're actually selling in the market. So this is not a support solution. This is a solution you're going to take to market to add value to your customers. So that's the big difference. And so the scary part of it, I realize, everybody manages their ERP system, all these other systems, and it can become a very scary process. IT is always a bad word in my world. So we try to avoid IT as much as possible. This is where I think the approach is, whoever you're partnering with to do this, like making sure that they're on board to not only help create something, but looking at this long term about how you're going to support that, and making sure that support is built in up front. Because I've seen cases where you say, hey, let's go build this, and we spent our $500,000 developing a product, and now, we'll do support, but we designed this poorly, so the support cost goes way, way, way up, and you just can't maintain that without getting to a critical number of customers using that product and paying for that product. So all of these things go hand in hand. And if you're not truly on the same team trying to make the right financial decisions, business decisions, market decisions, and technology decisions, you can't really get there. So the difference is if you're implementing an ERP system, you have a team, maybe you bring in some outside consultants, whatever, and you do that. There's challenges with that, but it's all to support your business. It's a much different, it's a cost center still, right?
Right.
So yes, you need it to continue operating your business, but it's still a cost center and there's a different mentality around that. The same people that operate that process are not who should be developing your products. Well, it's a different mindset.
Yeah, you're creating a value creation center, which is a value creation for the customers and for your eventual value of the business. So, when you think about, some of the listeners are familiar with like the traction approach. And if, you got this visionary, you got the different roles of the integrator and the different management levels. Who's crucial as for part of the team? And like, how does the visionary and the owner integrate with this? And how do you even take a first step into taking the ideas? Because I think most of the business owners have all these ideas, which is why they're an entrepreneur to begin with. So what is the crucial mindset and people that you need on board in order to even start down this path?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how to answer that question. So let me say this. So our general process is we'll come in and do kind of a kickoff meeting where it's really about understanding some of those ideas and getting those ideas on the table, and then start to, again, go back to the audiences and start to manage what of these functionality or features gets assigned to who's going to be using what audiences, right? And that helps us start to determine where we can kind of focus things that add value. So where are the value points? What are the things that have to happen regardless? If we want to provide this feature to this user and it adds a lot of value to them, but these things are requirements we have to add to these other audiences. So we start to kind of make a matrix of those features so that we can actually, so everybody's involved initially in kind of throwing out ideas and audiences, and because they see, ultimately you want the entire company represented, everybody that's, selling to these customers, people that are servicing, people that are providing, products or services. So all the way through, you really want feedback because they all have a little bit different view of that customer and what that customer needs and how you could add value to that customer. But once you do that, as you start to look now at the bigger picture of everybody involved in that and all the features and all the things you could combine to actually provide a real valuable product, it starts to become pretty obvious. And almost every session I've ever done, like a half hour in, we're like, okay, this seems to be the hot area that we need to focus on, where there's something real that this organization has something to offer and the customer has a big need there.
Well, what I find is really interesting is like a lot of entrepreneurs get really bored because they build something up, they're sustained. But I mean, a lot of we like to solve problems, right? And this is the definition of solving problems within the own customer base and your own industry that you already know that well. So, I mean, if you build a sustainable business that is there, you should be able to have the free time to go out, talk to your customers and really know what the problems are. Like, hey, this, prescription isn't filled in time and these are all the problems. This is all the disconnect of all these different people. Like, how do we solve that problem? Or the service is not integrated. I mean, like, just think about the simple stuff of like the smart home. They're like all these different things that are now colliding together. You're competing with people that you never used to because the technology is enabling certain, Amazon,
Yep.
they're right. In grocery stores now. So the technology is running through this. So I think the business owner should be able to get out there and explore this. And I think what's interesting about your approach in the minimal viable product and that whole business strategy first is there's not as much risk. You're not writing a $500,000 check to develop a bunch of code that might not be viable. You're on the forefront, being able to help understand what is actually the problem that we're trying to solve.
Right. Well, so my whole view of this, like if I go talk to an investor and say, I want to build a SaaS product, if I can't identify $100 million in potential market in the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to laugh at me. But I think there's a huge, huge potential for existing businesses to develop niche SaaS solutions that, if I can, in this manufacturing example again, if we can get to $1 million in recurring revenue, that has a huge, huge impact on that business owner and that business and those customers. So we can develop things at a smaller scale. So from my perspective, my goal is how do we actually minimize the risk, maximize the value, and maximize the likelihood that this is successful. So I don't need the massive upside, but we need to be consistent in making sure that there is a market and that we've validated our ideas. My little secret, I'll let you out. So if anybody's listening to this, that's actually we're working with, what we start off with, like I said, we have this meeting and kind of go through an idea assessment and concept assessment, and then business owners, and from what I've experienced, they really like to go out and talk to their customers, especially if they're talking about something new. So you're right, if they're bored and want to think about new things, what I do is we kind of set up a plan, and we'll do a weekly call after that for a few weeks to test some of the ideas and questions that came out of that. So we have the research from customers to say, yeah, I'd pay for that, or yes, I would need that, or no, here's how this works in our case. So you get them excited about doing that, and business owners love to go out and actually have those conversations with customers. And then that just feeds back into our evaluation process of a product and a business model.
And let's talk about the importance of this and becoming technology enabled as the next 5 to 10 years happen. Because you and I were rallying back and forth on a previous phone call about there's 4 million baby boomers that have businesses that are going to be going to market. Because it's like, again, if all of the people on your block decided to sell their house, if you're a buyer, you only have to buy the best ones. So explain how this integrates with that whole, going back to your economics degree, right? So explain, just a little bit about your mission behind that.
Well, yeah, my goal is that these businesses get sold for what they're worth, because people have put a lot of time and money into developing something, but in most cases, a lot of cases, it's not worth what they think. So I think the first thing is to understand what your business is worth, because if you don't know that, you're really walking blind. And I think a lot of people that started companies started because they knew this and they wanted to do work for themselves, but really had no idea about the end game for them. And I think that's changed some today. You were right. We were talking about this before, and I think that has changed some today. But there's so many people that, I started this company and ran it for 30 years. And what's going to happen in the next 5 years when you want to retire? I don't know. The kids don't want to take it over. I don't know what's going to happen. That's a big problem. So I think it's one thing, like, even if you have a company that might be worth something today, and you could sell it today, it's one thing, you need the valuation there, but you also need to be a player in the market to actually make that work. Because if I'm a buyer and I have 10 companies that do the same thing and I get to pick between them, I'm going to pick the best one, like you said, right? So if you're not in this market to actually, make sure this runs without you, make sure that you are scaling up, make sure that you're based on recurring revenue so the business continues to exist. If you're not thinking about those things now and you want to sell in 3 to 5 years, you're not going to be ready compared to the other businesses in your industry.
Because you're not going to be as competitive. Like if I'm a buyer and if I'm going to write a check for $2 million, I might finance 80% of it over 10 years. And am I going to want to go buy a service, whether it's HVAC, a garage door servicing, plumbing, or a legal firm or a CPA firm, any of these firms, I'm not going to pay more than 2 to 4 times because it's risky. Is it risky? Are the customers going to leave? Are there other, there's a guy that's creating an automated it's got automated payroll and accounting and all this stuff. What is the sustainability of that firm? And even like the garage doors, like all that stuff. If I'm going to go in and buy a firm, what is it? What am I going to be able to take and then scale? So is it going to be archaic? I think it's like you said, if there's going to be 10 of these on the market, which one are you going to want and why?
Right. And so that really gets in, like, you need to think like an investor is going to think 5 years from now. So why would they buy your business, and who are your competitors for that they would be looking at to buy instead, and why, and how can you stand out from there? So it really comes down to, the built to sell AT drivers. Those are a really, really good place to start from, I think. But how do you build recurring revenue? How do you get yourself out of the business? And ultimately, even if you're not selling, those are good things to do anyway, because it gives you more flexibility, it gives you more opportunity, it lets you focus on more interesting things. If you're bored doing, you build this company, now you just have to manage it. There's a lot of people in that case, that situation, that's like, hey, let's go work on something else or the next idea. whether it's software or something else. It just gives you a lot more flexibility. But
you're leveraging your industry experience too. It's not like you're going from, HVAC to managed IT services or something. You know what I mean? Like you're leveraging and deepening your industry knowledge and your customer base. And for some kind of benchmarks for the listeners, how long is this? Because I think everybody's been through, again, I'm going back to the horrible nightmares of software implementations, from idea to the whole process to, hey, I hopefully have some revenue coming into this and I can, see the value, because there's going to be that period of time before they actually capitalize on it in a sale or a transition. What is is it 1 year? Is it 5 years that they should expect? So that way, if if they're going to go to market and sell in 3 years, is this something that they want to tackle, or is it something that they should do? Focus their time and effort in some other places.
Yeah, it varies a lot based on how big the project is and what the value is. But I think in a lot of cases that we look at, our goal is to go through the validation process and the idea and concept piece of this over the course of the first 3 months. We spend a lot of time on that, and we think it's really, really important to mitigate our risk and our clients' risk. And then generally, it's probably another 3 to 6 months to develop. Our goal is really to get, hopefully you can start to get to some customers, even if they're not fully paying for it, but at least you start to get users on board in another 3 months or so. Ultimately, in most of the cases of what we're developing, it's another 6 months before you're fully developed. And so then the question is, how long does it take to get into the market? Now, that varies a lot, because what we really try to do, and the reason this isn't just randomly coming up with a product, right? We're trying to leverage your existing customers to add more value to them, and you already have that relationship. So it really, really matters what we're selling and how connected that is to that same group of customers, and how much you can leverage your existing relationships. So potentially that can, hopefully you're starting to see revenue 3 months after that. I think realistically it's another year out before you're really probably covering all the costs associated with this. But then, after that, at 2 years, you're really in a place where it should be self-sustainable and growing.
Is there a when you're looking, because you're exposed to all these businesses and all these industries like I am, is there certain industries that you see that are just ripe for low-hanging fruit to solve specific problems, or there's certain industries that are kind of behind, so people that are willing to make the effort, that you're going to be able to probably see them come out the other side in a pretty good spot?
I think there's so I've been asked that question a lot, and I don't really see there being specific industries that we target. I think it's almost every industry I've been involved in has had some opportunity, some way to think differently about it and create a different approach that creates a huge amount of opportunity. So the exception, here's the one I cannot figure out a solution for, is real estate agents. And now there's tons and tons of tools out there. It's one of those markets where it's already pretty saturated, but there's probably an opportunity we just haven't discussed. We haven't never dove into it. But that's the one example that always scares me. I'm like, I don't know if I'd want to work on that one because it's such a saturated market. But in most of these cases, there is a niche opportunity. So even though it might be a saturated market, there's a niche opportunity to go after a very, very specific part of that industry. So we're in conversations with a few different transportation groups, and we're working on some logistics stuff. I think it's really interesting that one of these is a very, very, very niche. They support trucking companies on the road. So they'll go out and service, like if they have a flat tire or engine problem or whatever, they'll go out and service them. Well, it's an interesting market, and it's a very, very specialized thing. There's lots of logistic products out there that do this, but none of them fully meet their needs because of the requirements of that specific type of business. It's not a trucking company. It's a little bit different, but most of those companies are using trucking software because it's similar to what they're doing. So if you can create a niche that actually it might be 10% different in order to actually solve exactly what's needed for that industry, you end up with something really, really valuable. And that applies to almost every industry. There's some kind of opportunity to do that.
Well, it's the mining for inefficiencies. Whether it's like I think you were working on, and I know you've got a bunch of confidentiality stuff, but it's like whether it's labeling and the process of handling of certain confidential goods, and the scanning and the transferring of information back and forth between people. Or I think there's just so much opportunity. The reason I'm diving into this is because I think it's the stories that people, when they start juicing their creative minds, is that there's that stuff all over the place. So I think it's just really just looking for problems.
Exactly. Looking for problems is it. So usually how we've had conversations where we'll just sit down with someone because they want to try to identify something and they don't have the ideas. We'll actually sit down and work with them and go through a session to try to pull out what some of those opportunities are. It takes a lot of research beyond that, but that's kind of the first step, is starting to find those ideas of where do people have challenges? What are the challenges? And a lot of times just go talk to people, go talk to your customers, find out what their challenges are if you don't know. And in the process of doing that, first, you're going to build probably much better customer relations, but you're also going to have a lot of fun and learn a lot about your market and your industry and your customers, in what actually where their struggles are and how you might be able to fix it.
Yeah, and as we're wrapping up here, when you said you've talked to a lot of investors, because you're working in the middle between, you got bringing someone and helping them create the value and solve the problems to potentially get them to an exit. What are the investors looking for? So when they're saying like, here's what we want, here's how to guide them, here's how, what are some of the trends that are common statements that these investors are looking for potential ripe acquisitions that they want?
They all service a little bit different markets, so they kind of have a size in mind, and a lot of them want kind of proof, right? So it's like, what is the definition of proof in this case that this is working? And then they want to know that you've gotten to X percentage of the market. How can they take it to the next percentage so they can grow this after they buy it? So having that kind of planned out of, we don't need to hit 100% of the market. We need to hit 5%, and they're going to take it to 20%, right? So it's just the conversations of where are they at and what are they looking, how much are they looking to invest, and what size do they want to get? Some say private equity groups want to spend $50 million on average, and some want to spend $5 million. So you just need to be in the right place, and also the numbers are a little different depending on what those are too, right? So a smaller market is probably going to be a smaller valuation, but there's a lot more opportunity for changing that through how you structure it, so it's super easy for them. So a lot of those, a $5 million buy can be a lot more complicated because it probably wasn't as well organized and didn't do a lot of the things that a 50 million company has done, right? So it's all kind of their perspective of how they're approaching this, but we work with them to kind of identify what their needs specifically are, and then we start to model what those goals should be, and we share those goals with them and say, if we do this, is that what you'd like to see? And they'll come back and actually modify and say, no, here's what we'd like to see in this time frame, this amount of market share, this valuation, this size, and that's what we shoot for then.
I love it. It's building a solution with the end in mind, 100%.
Exactly.
So, I know you got to run here. As we've covered a lot of different things, is there one thing you want to highlight or one thing you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the most critical thing is you got to get started. Like whatever, it might not be software. You need to figure out how to get yourself out of the business and how to actually build recurring revenue. And there are other ways to do that. This is the way we approach it, but you need to start, because I'm passionate about small businesses being able to actually create something, and creating something beyond the business owner is, I think, really important. So, and some people don't care about that, but I think most people should, because you're doing something that changes your family's life. You're changing your community. It's just so important for people to think about the exit. And I think for a long time, that wasn't really something that people thought about much. It happened, but it wasn't necessarily the day-to-day goal of how to design your business. And I think that's becoming more of a thing, but people need to step up and actually make it part of their effort to figure out what they're going to do with it and how they're going to approach it.
Well, now because of technology and different people like yourself that are actually doing this stuff is actually possible now. It's not some big black box. So it's actually something that's practical and something that can actually implement. Well, if our listeners are intrigued or they want to follow you, or what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Probably via email is probably the best, which is maybe you can post on the site. It's Loren, Loren Horsager, Horsager at mcomposer.com.
I love it. Loren, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Ryan.